We want to welcome to our studios here again. It's been a while, Ambrose, since we last spoke. It was sometime last year, and we had a break, obviously, for some reasons that we have explained before. We'd like to wish Michael all the best as well, and we'll certainly be communicating with him. But I thought that, you know, we need to continue a conversation. Obviously, there'll be a reconfiguration that has to take place in terms of fine-tuning and getting things done, but at least I think we can. And probably that's not already having too much installation in terms of conversations. Yes. And so we're going to have a conversation. So how are you doing?
I'm well. Been quite busy trying to get things together, organizing my life, you know, and I'm preparing. The season is coming upon us.
What season is that?
Well, you know.
Okay, now I thought you were like economics now, because how's your business doing? I know you're into the fruit juices,
yes,
natural juices and so on.
The fruit juice, well, actually I'm in the process of working on a deal presently.
Oh,
and so I'm really hoping that by the next few months I'll have some very positive news to give in relation to this. So it's looking good.
Yeah, because we want to encourage people as much as possible, and we're about to start a campaign here at Calabash TV, encouraging people to consume what's locally grown. I think I'm sure you've probably seen a video we did, which is on the Good Food Revolution, where we encourage people to look for and consume and support farmers who are trying to go organic, who are lessening their dependence on chemicals, agrochemicals, and so on, because obviously we know the impact of it. I just did a feature as well on Monrepo, cancer in Monrepo having one of the highest cases of cancer in St. Lucia. And it's linked again to chemicals in the bananas in agriculture. So we would certainly want to encourage that kind of a venture where we encourage people to consume what's locally grown, especially if it's organically grown. And I suppose that's one of your concerns when you engage your farmers as well.
But actually, as a matter of fact, I mean, one of the things that I try to do is buy fruits that I know that doesn't actually use chemicals. I do ask the people sometimes. I mean, although generally fruits like mangoes and these things, there are no chemicals being sprayed on these things, so we don't have an issue. But these things like when it comes to fruits like passion fruit and that sort of thing, you have to be careful. You have to make sure that the persons who are growing it are trying to do it as organically as they can. The truth of the matter is, St. Lucia, we really need to start looking at our eating habits. I myself have actually done a lot of changes. I mean, it's probably not showing in my body as yet.
It takes a little while, yeah.
But I've started doing some changes, trying not to eat too late at night. Also being very conscious of what it is that I consume. Right. And especially as I'm getting older, obviously that is not going to help me if I'm going to just put a lot of garbage into my body. People sometimes complain about fruit juices and the cost of it, but what people don't realize, it takes a lot of effort and energy to actually produce fruit juices. I mean, and some of the fruit juices, and I will be quite clear about it, some of the fruit juices that you will find on shelves in supermarkets and things like that, I mean, you think about it, I mean, you can have a fruit juice sitting on a shelf for months upon months upon months, and then you can go and buy it and consume it. Something is wrong there, because fruits are not made to stay that long. So obviously they have the preservatives and things of that. So the local juices, it's a little different. You have to consume it within a certain time period. So really and truly, for me, it is that I want to encourage people that they need to. It is a little costly.
Yeah, but if you look at the healthcare cost, because you'll spend a lot more money going to the doctor
exactly.
trying to figure stuff out.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I say to people. Like sometimes I tell them, look, if you're going to have a carbonated drink, yes, it's great. It's full of sugar. It's tasty, and your buds like it, because sometimes we train ourselves to actually put these things into our body. But the truth of the matter is, in the long run, you see people walking about with paper asking for donations because they have to go and cut a leg somewhere, or somebody a barbecue. We can avoid these things if we are conscious. My theme, I always say to people, I say the Bible tells us that God gives us 10. So it's almost like a promise that God guarantees us that we will have 70 years to live. Yeah. But in the process, we have to live circumspectly, which means to live carefully. And if you don't live carefully, then if you live outside of that, and you die really early because of your body gives up on you. And like for me, I have to some degree abused my body to some degree. Well, I've been vegetarian for 30-something years. But at the same time, I would say, if I had my way, again, I would have never done some of the things to my body
Right.
in terms of what I put into it, you know, as I did then.
No, we get 3 scores and 10, but you want to have a quality of life as well.
Exactly.
Because you don't want to be living up to 70, but you're at the doctor's office ever so often, you're spending
Exactly.
money on it, and then you have a whole bunch of other issues, health issues. And so that's one of the things that we want to focus on. So we're happy that you're into this business
Good.
and still continuing it.
Consume
And so
local.
Consume local.
Consume
it
local.
might cost you a little more, but it's good for the economy. If we concern about, we just spoke about independence, if we concern about the economy, if you support local farmers who grow local, you cut down on importation of foreign juice.
Absolutely.
You take care of yourself in terms of you have a healthier body, and so you have less need to go to the doctors and buy so much medication and so on. So it makes sense economically in terms of your health as well, and also for the well-being of our, the country as well. We're just coming out of independence. So how was that celebration for you? It looked like there was a pretty big party.
Well, there was a party, but I must confess, I myself did not really partake too much of the independence. I mean, not because of anything. It's just that I myself, I was home. I saw the parade. I watched some of it on TV, and I actually looked at a lot of clips online through WhatsApp. It was nice. I must confess, it was nice. I mean, there was all the controversy about cost of the fireworks and that sort of thing. But it was generally, I thought it was a nice independence.
Yeah, for the 40th anniversary, I think we need to spend a little more. And a discussion that we will have in just a little bit as well, I'm saying, is what exactly are we celebrating for independence? And so
That's the question.
You can celebrate an occasion,
Yes.
which is what the independence celebration anniversary was, but there are other things that you can celebrate. For example, I know the West Indies cricket team was here with England, and we were all happy to celebrate cricket.
Right.
But for me as a solution, there'll be a lot more for me to celebrate if there were at least a couple of celebrations on the team. That leads to the question of whether we have strong cricket programs. Is there enough government support for the grassroots program? And so that's how I see independence, not just a celebration. You can have a big party with a lot of fireworks and everybody wearing the national colors and so on. But I want to celebrate people who have achieved. So for independence, if we had 11 Spencer for the Olympic-bound athletes, national cricketers who play for West Indies, that's a bigger celebration for me.
Yes.
So we'll discuss that in terms of what does independence mean as well. We're in the season of scholarships, where government announces scholarships available to students who want to go for further studies and so on. And the government announced 2 island schools. Yes. And this time, quite interestingly, 2 guys have won the island schools. So that's quite an interesting development.
Very good sign.
Yes, very good sign. So they are Daniel Cotter of the South Louis Community College and Mr. Savinsky Joseph, who's a graduate of the Viewfort Comprehensive School, the KIP division, which is a very encouraging sign, as we just said. And also the other governments that are giving scholarships, I think the Taiwanese have announced scholarships as well. They're also giving in a range of bachelor's program, master's or PhD degrees, which is quite encouraging.
Yes.
And I think they do give quite a number of scholarships. I don't have the exact number, but they offer programs. There are 3 scholarship programs.
35 last time. They give quite a bit, actually.
It's quite significant.
Yes.
And also, it was also announced that the government of New Zealand is also giving scholarships, which is quite interesting as well, in terms of some of the areas they're looking at, master's and PhD degrees, and the areas of study, which I found quite interesting, quite encouraging for us as a developing nation. Climate change and the environment, food security and agriculture. We were just discussing food security a while ago. Yes. Renewable energy and disaster risk management. Now, let me just, for persons who are watching, the deadline for the New Zealand scholarships, if you're interested, and you can go to the Ministry of Education's Facebook page to get details, is March 20th for the New Zealand scholarships. And for the Taiwan scholarships, I think they're starting from March 15th, I think, that you can start applying for it. And also, there's one more I wanted to mention quite quickly, is quite interestingly, from Australia. There's a cricket scholarship that's been offered to Caribbean nationals for Murdoch University and Western Australia Cricket Association. So that's quite interesting for young
cricketers.
Guys who are interested in scholarships. So that's quite encouraging. And so we encourage you, if you're interested in advancing your studies, to go online, go on the Ministry of Education's Facebook page and get details. Now, the point I wanted to make, Ambrose, is we must support and encourage and celebrate the government giving to island schools, which is good. So 2 students.
That's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Yes.
But the point I wanted to raise is, in terms of a country, I think...
With 170,000 people.
Right, that our country ought to do better than that in terms of...
I know for years... about 60-something%.
Yeah, I know for years we've been giving one island, I think it was upgraded to 2, But I think Taiwan and New Zealand and Australia can be nicer to our youth than our own government.
Exactly.
And so I was thinking that, probably there ought to be some policy where once you qualify, the government should be responsible for giving your scholarship to advance yourself. And the other thing too, and probably there should be some gender equity as well, because to me, the highest ranking female should get a scholarship. It can't just be two.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So what are your thoughts?
You could put things into place. You could put grading systems into place, but really and truly, for me, it shows the priority of government. I always say it's really sad, and apart from these three that you mentioned, I know OAS gives scholarships.
And Cuba gives.
I know Cuba gives.
Quite a bit, yeah.
Apparently, I heard also that Mexico gives scholarships, but nobody ever seems to take up the Mexican scholarships. But the point is, there are lots of scholarships around the place. But for me, it's really sad in a way that we have to depend on foreign. I mean, I know we don't have a whole ton of money, but sometimes when you hear the way that money is being spent here on things that are trivial, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, when you think of the millions of dollars sometimes that are given to consultancies and things like that, if you were to just say you'll cut the consultancy fees in half, and the rest of the money you will take it and give scholarships to young St. Lucians who are deserving of it, I mean, how much of an improvement could you do to the actual society? Because one thing we're having is, they call it the brain drain. So if you go and study, I remember when I was younger, if you got bursaries from government, you had to come back to do your service. Now, I think it was being said that some people would not come back. And so basically, but you can put things into place to make sure that people come back and serve their time and not necessarily work for government, but actually you can put them into local businesses. And basically, I think it requires a thought process that has the population as a priority.
But I don't think, I understand students have to come back, especially if you have a loan and so on, but there should be some commitment to repay the loan. But I don't see a problem with the brain drain in a positive way, because we won't be able to hire all our students for sure.
Yes.
We won't be able to pay them what they deserve for sure. And so if they get qualified and they're out there representing and doing well and establishing a track record for themselves, I'm fine with that, because these are St. Lucians who are doing well, as opposed to St. Lucians who are home not doing anything.
I agree.
So, but if there's a loan situation, obviously there must be a commitment to repay.
But the thing about it is, with the limited quantity of scholarships that you have,
right?
And so, if, for example, when I make reference to the brain drain, if Taiwan gives me a scholarship, why should I feel any commitment to come back home and to give something towards this? But if my government, which is my government, shows that it cares for me and it gives me a scholarship to enable me to get a university degree, then obviously I will feel, maybe hopefully I would have some kind of desire to come back home and to make sure that there's development. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you have foreign entities are giving more scholarships than government itself, then naturally people will move in that direction of not caring for the actual society that they grew up within.
And I'm not saying that we want the foreign governments to cut down on the scholarships they're giving. We want them to give some more.
Yes.
But the point I'm making is that our government should be committing a little more to our students. And that's my personal feeling, that students shouldn't have to take loans and burden themselves and burden their parents and tie up the properties and so on. Okay, let's look just a simple example, because you might say, where is the money coming from? We can put a tax for the airport. We can put a 150 on gas to raise money to fix roads.
Yes, yeah.
I, as a solution, wouldn't mind paying.
But it's $4 and not 150.
Yeah, that's the correction. I wouldn't mind paying a little extra once I'm guaranteed that money is there available for students to study. And so on, because I think we need to educate, because it's much better to have 10 students with degrees and 10 students who are just out there struggling and not having any ways and means to be able to take care of themselves.
But not just them too. I mean, yes, that's great for the students whose parents are able to put some kind of asset up to enable them to go and study. What about the students who have, their parents have no assets, but they are bright,
right,
and they may not necessarily be at a level of an island scholar, but at the same time they are bright enough to actually be able to go to university. What about students like that? If they cannot get a scholarship, what do they do?
And so that's something the state has to step in. and give scholarship based on merit, not on who you know, but on merit.
Yes.
Once you meet a particular benchmark, then the state, I've even said that I don't mind government putting back the 2.5% that it took off VAT.
And put it into education.
And put it into education, because if it's going to be, if it's $52 million, we can do with that in education,
yes,
and sports and the arts. And so, I mean, we were paying it before, it was tough, but if we have to put it back to make sure that our young people get an education. And I think it's a cause that groups like the NYC and youth groups and youth and sports councils should be taking on. They have, and that's why you'll hear me talking quite a bit about policy, they need to develop a policy and pitch it to government and say, listen, these are our youth, this is what we need, and here are a few solutions that you can consider.
Government is not fearful of the NYC anymore. I remember the days when government used to be worried about the NYC. Well, I remember when I was an NYC member, long back in the days of Justice Michel, Mary Michel, you know, when he was the president, I used to be in the NYC when we had branches in every little nook and cranny in St. Lucia. Government used to be very afraid of NYC then.
But we don't want government to be afraid of it.
Well, what I'm saying is, at least there was a voice. There was a voice. You actually, they listened. They were wary and they
so
were
is it that
concerned.
youth are no longer interested in getting into organizations and representing their interests and so on?
Well, I'll tell you, when I was a young man in St. Lucia, I remember quite clearly the Methodist Church, we used to have a youth group with 150 members.
Wow.
A youth group with about 150 members.
And they were all attending meetings and
Leslie
functions?
Mondesi, Lon Theophilus, a lot of the name in St. Lucia, they all went through that same youth group. And I mean, there's so many. I mean, most people that I see in our society, a lot of them were in that youth group. Nowadays, they hardly have youth groups. Young people seems to have lost interest in this thing. So I don't know if it is the adults who are not interested in making the time to direct young people. I was about to say,
is it because the avenues are not there, so the structures are not there for them to get involved, or is it because if you leave it to the youth, they just wouldn't take the initiative and do it themselves? But if there's a structure, yes, and you have to do this as part of a way of advancing yourself, I think part of it is, and I think I've heard this government say that they're willing to, there's a plan to put those things back in place, but organizations like the Youth Council, church groups and so on, they ought to take a deeper interest in channeling youth into organizations. All right, there's a lot more we have to discuss. We'll take a short break here. When we come back, we'll discuss Teddyson in Trinidad and the Prime Minister. And also, there's so much more we need to talk about as well. So stay tuned. This is the reality show here on Calabash TV.
This is our reality, Calabash TV.
Welcome back to Calabash TV and the reality show, and with me is, I didn't even introduce your name the first time, I just figure you, like
well, yes, everybody knows.
You don't need an introduction.
Yeah, Ambrose.
Ambrose is there with
Ambrose
me.
Adolph.
Normally you would see Michael with us, but Michael
Yes.
is recuperating, so we wish him all the best, and I'm sure at some point in time we'll have a conversation with him as well. Teddyson John did exceptionally well. He's done exceptionally well for many years now, representing St. Lucia.
Yes.
And what was your thought? I don't know if you saw him perform, but I'm sure you heard of him
I've seen
performing.
the video.
You've seen the video. What was your thoughts? Not the Prime Minister video, Teddyson John performing.
No, I saw bits of the video,
Okay.
and it's a real shame that his performance and what he achieved was actually, I would say, overthrown by this antic. I call it an antic.
But is it the antic or the reaction to the antic? Because to me, if you ignored what happened, shouldn't St. Lucian say, all right, this is a Prime Minister who's obviously, you know, trying to I mean, the Prime Minister has a right to be there. He's the Prime Minister of the country, and they'd be happy to see him supporting the arts. To me, there's nothing wrong with that. But obviously, he's doing it for other motives as well. Now, should St. Lucian say, okay, let's focus on Teddyson, let's celebrate Teddyson?
Yes. But for certain, and I think Teddyson did a good job. And I mean, you think about it, for the first time, I mean, he got second place. And so that's a great achievement. It is not often that the Trinidadians are nice enough to other islands to enable them to get space within their, you know, like their soca monarch and things like that. So I think he did well, and I think he should be celebrated. And I've just wished that that was what we were celebrating more than anything else, that he did well in Trinidad. And I'm always for the arts, and I don't care what anybody says. I am an artist myself, so I would always support the artist. And I think he did a wonderful job. I would focus on him and say, great job, well done. And and may it continue. Like you say, he's doing good things. But I just hope in future that what happened this time does not happen again. And I also putting him in a really compromising his position, because obviously I'm sure he got wind of the reaction, and so he cannot seem to show that he was not happy with the PM being there. I just think more reasonableness should have been used in the manner in which this happened. You didn't have to do this behind the, interestingly, what could have happened? It could have all happened in the back, and then like in an interview, Ted could have said, it was really great, the PM came to support, and I was really happy to see him. And he would have gotten the same props, but in a different manner, but it's just as if he just took all the lights, from him. And I think that's really shameful. I feel that was shameful.
Yeah, I think there could have been, it was almost ill-advised to be capitalizing on Ted Edison's moment at this time. And don't get me wrong, the Prime Minister has to support, and the Prime Minister should be there, and he has a right to be there to support a national who's performing. He's in Trinidad, doing other things, and he's there for the show. Obviously, you come and you support. Okay, if he didn't show up, then people say, oh, he was in the audience and he never showed up and so on, so you'd get that backlash as well. But I think the PR people ought to think that you need to think, first of all, about the reaction to what it is and whether you're achieving the purpose. If the purpose is to celebrate Ted Edison, and you know that we live and work in a very highly sensitive political situation, it's not going to work for Ted Edison. Because when I look at the Facebook and all the social media comments and so on, and even the talk shows, people weren't celebrating Teddy that much. They were discussing the Prime Minister's being there, participating in this.
As a matter of fact, I saw somebody made an attempt to try and refocus the conversation to say, well, hey, it was Teddy's show and he did great, and he actually accomplished something. Somebody tried, but I think that was like after the horses already bolted.
Yeah, so there's two things there. One, I think, the Prime Minister should have thought differently. To me, he could have done it, still documented it, but I wouldn't put it out. He's there backstage and he supported and he can make an announcement that I was there to support Teddy and so on. Yeah. Considering the situation, under normal circumstances, there would be nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
But I think that he could have done it and supported Ted Edison, congratulated Ted Edison, because if he was at the venue and so on, and then the focus would remain on Ted Edison.
Yes.
So I think there was an error there, and also I think now us as the people, we should have celebrated Ted Edison. And it's difficult to forget the Prime Minister, and like you say, his antics, but we could have still celebrated Ted Edison and say, all right, the Prime Minister, we know what he tried, but let's celebrate Ted Edison. So it's because we are the ones on social media, it's not the Prime Minister.
But we
are the ones sustaining it.
But the sad reality is, I don't think it will ever get to that point, because I think that event has overshadowed everything. So it will be really, it's like Ted Edison is going to have to be trying to claw back to gain the actual. He'd have to claw back to gain all the accolades that should have been actually prescribed to him by people. It would be difficult, because to try and whenever he tries to, people will always see the PM there.
Yeah, no, I think St. Lucians will forget that and they'll move on and celebrate.
Yes, on to the next thing, I guess. Yes.
Ted Edison is a St. Lucian, a well-loved St. Lucian
artist. No, I'm talking about the actual event.
The event itself,
not Ted Edison as an artist. No.
So obviously. What I thought, and I'm hoping, I saw Darwin today, but I didn't get a chance to speak with him. What I'm hoping, and to me, which should have been the correct gesture, and I'm sure it's been thought of, and probably it's done, I'm not sure, I haven't really checked for a while, that the Prime Minister now will announce that we have a prize for Teddy, for Ted Edison, because he has represented St. Lucia, he has drawn attention to St. Lucia in his performance, so that's marketing for the country. It's what we do for jazz, we bring John Legend in and we pay him. So I know probably Ted Edison is being paid by the Trinidadians and so on who organize the event, but for coming in second, I think government ought to say, listen, we want to give you to cover your expenses, to celebrate your. That's the kind of announcement I want to see that's following up, because we can't just tell him thank you, and that's it.
But I don't know, Bernard. I don't. I'll be quite honest with you. Athletes, I understand. I don't know if I really support government giving money to artists in that way. Actually, I mean, as an artist and as a supporter,
no, but we're doing it for the artists. We're doing it for John Legend when he comes in here. And under the guise that he's marketing the country. Ted Edison is marketing St. Lucia.
Well, guess what?
The flag. Well, no, not for performing, for his achievement.
Right.
To celebrate his achievement. Because he has to put a lot into preparing. And I know I've spoken with him, it's very, very costly participating in those competitions. He's in Trinidad, somebody has to pay for his room and board.
Well, yes, that's true. The cost is.
But no, I'm saying, and that's why I want to talk about policy, because the country ought to have a policy that says, if you place in a competition internationally,
Yes.
this is our contribution to you to say thank you, because we all know people need money to do stuff.
Yes.
Because we will do it for the foreign artists coming in, we'll pay them well, put them up in fancy hotels and everything else.
But you see, but that is what I would like to see, Bernard. Instead of giving Teddyson a prize for having performed and done well in Trinidad, what I would like to see government do is spend money in the arts.
Well, that too.
And so,
Well, that's one way of
so you
spending.
have a situation where an artist doesn't have to now be waiting for some kind of prize from government, but situations are created. I mean, I started a little campaign. I think everybody was laughing at me where where I started this little campaign, 65%. Why doesn't the government write policy that all radio stations has 65% of its content must be local? So instead of Echo collecting all this money and sending it to Jamaica and sending it to Barbados, why is it that the bulk of the money does not come to the artists in St. Lucia who registered with Echo? And we have situations, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think the Dennis segment, for example, have done great. They have done a lot. But you know what? People are going to eventually get tired of the Dennis segment. Where do we go to next? It's going to keep developing. The music will keep developing.
We have to evolve.
Yeah. Well, let's hope it evolves
it has
so
to
that
evolve.
so that it can continue to
Right.
keep people's interest. But what happens if it doesn't?
Right.
A situation has to be created. I was listening to a radio station. I will not name the radio station, and just I kind of just thought, let me hear what's going on. I'm listening for an hour and I cannot hear a St. Lucian song, and all I am hearing is Jamaican songs, Super Cat, and all this Jamaican artists. I'm like, but what benefit is that to us as a public? I blame the DJs too, you know. I know they like to say.
Right. Blame the DJs as well, but also blame the artists as well, because the artists have to mobilize and also to agitate as well, because we like to think that government has to do this, and government, it's true, there ought to be a policy. Because if you're
They
giving
need legislation.
If you're giving a spectrum, which is a national resource, you're giving somebody our airwaves to run a radio station, there ought to be a purpose for you being there.
Yes.
And it is to support what is St. Lucian.
Absolutely.
Because almost 80 to 90% of the money leaves. We're exporting money
That's right.
that we're paying
That's
to Echo,
right.
and the money leaves.
That's right.
So there ought to be, and that's part of economic stimulation. That's part of the policy. Government has to have a policy of making sure that the stations that you give a license to,
Yes.
you give them a national resource, ought to have a policy where they give us, you promote and push local music.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't have a problem with presently if government wants to present some money to Teddyson. I have no problem because I
Well, that
support the arts. So, yeah. But for me, it will give me great joy to see government makes a decision that they are going to focus on the ways and means by which they are going to enable the development of the arts. And not just give lip service to it, but do something serious. Let us get legislation in place. Let us get the radio stations, let us put fines if they do not play 65%. I'm asking for 65%. I mean, some people want to ask for 75%. Even if they played 50%, it would be great for us.
Yeah.
Why is it that these things, and I look at Calabash TV as a good example. Calabash TV has a lot of local, our national content. A lot of the other stations do not. I mean, they spend more time playing Hollywood movies. I know people like Colin makes is into he's interested in making movies. Right. Colin Wicks, right? Why is it that money is not being spent to help him develop that? That's what I would like to see government spend money on.
Agreed. You mentioned the Dennis segment earlier on, and I was saying too, I know the government did sponsor a trip for the Dennis, which is all good for them to get exposure and so on. But what I'm saying is, and that's what is the same thing we're discussing, that I'd like to see as a result, we know everybody went to New York and celebrated and so on, but I'd like to see the government look at Denry, for example. I know some of the artists are not from Denry, but look at Denry, for example, and say, oh, there's barely a music program in the school, let's fund that. And let's put money in there, because we want the next generation of Denry artists to be able to read music, to be able to write music, because we know they have to evolve.
Yes.
They've already established themselves, they've already got the attention of the world, but knowing that, and you're in the business, it's not just attention. You have to sustain interest.
Absolutely.
And you have to keep evolving.
Yeah, you have to remain significant.
And remain relevant.
Yeah.
And so now, to me, the way you celebrate the Denry segment is by looking at the Denry area and Barbon, wherever the guys are from, and look at whether the music programs in those schools, and fund this music program, fund the School of Music, to make sure that we have the next generation of musicians who are coming
And the
out.
National String Orchestra.
And, then, and Pearl's Orchestra as well.
Yes.
Because provide funds so then the musicians who are coming out, who are writing the Denry segment songs, will learn how to write songs, they learn how to read music, and so then it can help evolve and also be able to meet expectations globally and so on. So I agree with you, there ought to be that serious investment. It's not just celebrating the occasion. As we said about independence, we celebrate it, but we want to see a correspondent investment in development.
Absolutely.
So you know that we're celebrating something that came out of a process.
Absolutely.
So even we had a very, and we must commend Adrian Oji for the production, Adrian Oji and Junior Frederick for the production that they had. But I would have loved to see a year-long program where you had government investing monies in schools' theater programs and tell them, listen, we want you to put in a production for independence next year, but we want you to have a workshop setting in it. You know, as part of your preparation, we want you to write the pieces, we want you to design the costumes. So you're developing people along the way. So by the time you get to independence, these participants, these students would have mastered something.
And the excuse that there is no money, I don't think that's a good excuse.
No, we can get
because the truth of the matter is, I mean, you think about it, in the last 2.5, well, not 2.5, it's almost 3 years, the government has loaned $1.2 billion. I mean, you telling me that out of that $1.2 billion, that the government couldn't say it will put $5 million towards development of the arts in St. Lucia? I mean, when you can give a consultant $32 or $31 million, you tell me you cannot, out of that, you cannot think, you know what, let me take $10 million, EC dollars, and I will spend it on the arts in St. Lucia to really develop it, organize it, so we can make it marketable.
And so that's why I'm saying that now the government has that responsibility, but we as a people now, the fraternity, in that case the creative industries, ought to prepare policy and take it to the government. I know, like Boo said, nobody listens to you, but you need to have something documented and say, this is our policy, this is what we want you to implement for us, because they must come back to you in 5 years' time to get elected.
No, but I'll tell you another thing too. I mean, I don't want to leave out the actual artists themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They are their own
artists.
worst enemies also,
Yeah.
because the truth of the matter is, I mean, I look at, I just yesterday I was reading a comment made online by a friend about what's going on at the hotels. I mean, I wouldn't detail some of the things,
Yeah.
because some things there, I think it could be something that you can find yourself into legal trouble for, what is being said.
Yeah.
But this guy, he's basically was saying that they're not developing community and proper employment. That's not what they're doing. What they're doing is looking for ways to find money for themselves. And in the process, what they're doing is they're destroying musicians, good musicians for that matter. Because if you don't want to play the game, then basically you are left out of the loop. And so I remember when I was a young artist, I used to sing at hotels. I've sang with bands. I used to work for Sandals. I mean, I was, at one time I was one of Sandals' main singers. I used to do cabaret for Sandals.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, when you think about it, I remember sometimes Sandals would pay me for my night $1,000 EC dollars. And I'm talking about 1994. You're going to do a cabaret at Sandals today, you couldn't get $1,000 for your performance in the night.
Right.
Now, is it to do with the quality of the performance? I don't know. Okay? Because I mean, I used to do proper cabaret. And I'm talking about cabaret that, you know, proper cabaret, not just going on stage and singing and talking to people.
We've seen your productions,
Right. So the thing about it is, when you think about it, instead of progressing, we have regressed. And the musicians are partly responsible for that.
And that's why I keep saying about we the people. We the people, because we keep waiting for politicians. Listen, politicians will not do things in our favor until we force them to do it. And we the people have to stand up and say, listen, we deserve better. This is our country. There are two things that politicians want from you, your taxes and your vote. So you need to go share those things. You want my taxes, you want my vote, these are the things that we want. I keep telling people, the same way Mr. Shastney had a 5 to stay alive, all of us are supposed to have our 5 to stay alive and tell Mr. Shastney, how can you deliver on, I mean, I understand what he's trying to do. He has to create jobs and so on. He has to meet those national needs. But there are local solutions who have needs that have to be addressed by governments.
Yes.
And across the board, the fraternity has been like that for a while in terms of, I'm talking about the creative industries now, across governments. You know, so, but we haven't stood up to say, listen, this is what our needs are, this is what we want. And so we expect you, talk to me about how you're going to deliver on those things for me. If the issue is money, we can talk about how we're going to raise the funds for it in terms of whether it's taxes we pay or whether we find, because governments can find creative ways of raising taxes. And so the point is, the people have to be mobilized. And I agree, I was talking to Echo recently, and the artists have to get mobilized, because you can't sit down there as an artist and see 90% of money is collected from radio stations and other places. Go away, leave the country. Whereas you can tell a government, listen, we want you to put policies in place because you give licenses, the licenses belong to the country, and tell the people who are getting the licenses that's the condition. And if they don't want to abide by those conditions, then they find something else to do. But the musicians and the entertainers have to draft something and agitate.
But the thing about it is, I think greed plays a role in this. There's a degree of greed in this. I don't know, organization is not very good. Musicians are not they're not together.
But it's across the board, Ambrose, sorry for cutting you, but it's across the board, because if you look at sports, if you look at politics, the parties themselves aren't best organized.
Yes.
So we have an issue, and I was telling a former minister that we have an issue of organizations. Our organizations are weak, and so there's no leadership organizations, a proper leadership structure in those organizations. And so if there isn't a proper leadership structure, everything else is going to fall out of place. And so that's what I was saying, one of the major challenges we have is leadership at all levels. And so we want to see a stronger leadership from the church, and a plan to develop leadership at sports organizations, the creative fraternity, politics as well, because if you look at the parties, probably a few people running a party.
True.
You know, so one of my things I'm saying is that we need to focus on leadership as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Musicians need to, and then, but another thing, when I speak to musicians, like for example, I have been having this conversation about forming a union. Nobody wants to form a union.
Right.
Everybody's afraid. I was speaking to a well-established St. Lucian musician who travels all over the world performing, and I said to him, why is it that we do not have a musicians union in St. Lucia? And he told me there was a time it came very close to being formed, but I understood that the St. Lucia Hotel and Tourism Association had something to do with getting, almost like they got in the way of it, and some of the musicians themselves were siding, and so before you know it, people forming different groups. And so, because what happens is, this musician, he's well established, he gets work, so he's not really worried about the smaller musicians who are not getting work as frequently as him. And that actually still exists today, in that those who are getting the work, they're not worried about the future, as long as they're okay.
Yeah.
And that's how it has been for years. Now, if somebody 20 years ago had said, forget about 20 years ago, let's say 30 years ago, somebody 30 years ago said, you know what, this industry is going to develop. You know what we need to do? We need to be organized. We're going to form a union. We're going to get musicians in. You need to have a certain standard. Like I know, for example, I'm a member of Equity in the UK. I'm a member of Equity, and Equity have their rules how you can join. So and no hotel will be able to just go and get a musician off the street and just employ them. That will not happen. What we would do would shut that hotel down when it comes to entertainment. We can do it. If the musicians were to come together and decide that they're going to form a proper union, things will change. Wages will change. Musicians will stop complaining about only earning $100 a night. There are musicians who are going to work in the year 2019 performing an hour and a half for 2 hours sometimes. And they have to beg sometimes for a drink in the break. And they're still getting $100 a night. That is crazy. That is what I used to, when I worked for Francis Francois in his band, my first band, I was getting $150 a night. In 1988.
Wow.
1988.
So you see, we have so much work to do, us as the people. Forget politicians for the time being. See, we need to get organized as a people, because politicians are quite happy for us to be divided, so we can be conquered.
Yes.
And so to everybody else, the hotel association, everything else, if musicians are not organized, there's no way they can put pressure on hotels.
Yes.
And so the point I'm making is, and we'll wrap up because we have a shortened program today, because we have another program coming up after this, that we the people need to get organized. I'm not saying, you know, that political parties and governments have a role to play. They do.
Yes.
But you have to give them directions. But you can only do that if you organize. If you're not organized, then there's a lot of things we have to discuss, including the airport, but we have a shortened show today because there's a program that's coming immediately after this. And very quickly, we're just coming out of International Women's Day. Obviously, a big occasion for us to celebrate women in St. Lucia who've done exceptionally well. And Calabash TV is running a series. We've already celebrated Laverne Spencer. Yes. We just did one with Marilyn Gaston, who is from On Repose. She's involved with cancer awareness and so on. We did one with the Raise Your Voice St. Lucia, where they raised funds.
Catherine Sillies.
Catherine Sillies.
Catherine Sills.
Yeah, and then we do have an author who's coming on pretty soon as well, Alice Mida, who's just released the book.
Okay.
There are a few women I will be celebrating throughout the month of March on Calabash TV, so keep watching Calabash TV
That's
for
great.
those features as we celebrate women. Good to see you.
Yes.
We
You
will
too.
certainly have some more conversations again.
Yes.
And like I said, there's a lot of things we have to discuss. We must touch on the airport as well.
Yes.
And the airport is ongoing.
Yeah,
and
some key things that needs to be touched on.
Right, so we'll
yes.
discuss that as well.
There's a lot happening.
There's a lot happening, and there's a lot more that is going to happen.
Yes, yes.
So thanks a lot. Good to see you on all this.
Yes, thanks again.
This is The Reality Show.